Hey, Sales Enablement Podcast listeners. Today we'd like to introduce you to another show by Revenue.io. It's the all new and reimagined RevOps Podcast, where we are interviewing and working with some of the world's thought leaders around sales engagement, sales enablement, and all things go-to-market. Join me, I'm Alistair Wilcock, Chief Strategy Officer at Revenue.io, along with our prestigious founder and CEO, Howard Brown, as we interview, talk, and ideate about not just how to help sellers sell, but how to help buyers buy. And here's a special episode for you. If you like what you hear, join us and subscribe to the RevOps Podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Alistair Wilcock. This is the RevOps Podcast with myself and Howard Brown. As you recall, last episode, we focused on FOMO is dead, and are you ready to sell using customer value creation? I'm super excited to welcome part 2 today with Brent Adamson, one of my personal friends and one of the best thought leaders in this space. Just for reference, to remind everybody, Brent Adamson, former Distinguished Vice President of Gartner, now Global Head of Research at Communities Eco. He's the pioneer, but one of the co-authors of Challenger Sale, Challenger Customer, and quite arguably for the better part of 2 decades has been the go-to thought leader for sales leaders around the world. So we're very excited to have him with us. Howard, Brent, welcome back to part 2.
Thank you, Alistair.
Excited to be here.
All right, so I left us on a bit of a cliffhanger last time, where we were talking about, how do we engage with rational buyers and customer value creation. And we all agreed we need to do this. We all agreed that there's mechanisms to do it in terms shifting from the I motions to the we motions in terms of the importance of data, bringing it all together, benchmarking moments, and this idea of continuous value creation, that we're always doing it. But we left with the question of, we're all nodding our heads going, yes. But Brent, you and I chatted with a lot of sales leaders around the world, and they all go, that's really interesting. That sounds wonderful. But you know what? I got to figure out how to get my reps to sell a little bit more. I want to understand, how to drive up a little bit of quota. It always falls back to this just tactic of the checklist of sales leadership to-dos instead of making these transformational shifts that really are going to move the company ahead. What's your experience in that? And then we'll talk how we actually do this.
Couple thoughts on that, Alistair. This idea of moving towards a value approach or a value-based approach that I've been watching, I think it's really interesting. Again, as I mentioned last time we talked, there's a number of C-suite officers have value in their title. There's value engineers. There's particularly large tech companies are hiring a large number of value consultants or value experts. What I'm seeing, I imagine you guys are seeing the same thing, is the rise of a whole new function in the commercial space. It feels like value today is kind of where customer success was about 6 years ago. I remember when it kind of came out of nowhere, and now it's everywhere and there's these big functions. And it strikes me as the last thing that we all need right now, particularly if you're a head of sales or head of marketing, is yet one more function inside the commercial space. And so it seems to me like we're very close to being on a just desperately wrong path of creating the value management office or the value management function that sits alongside of sales. Now we got sales, marketing, service, success, value. How are you going to wrap your brain around that? So I think that the thing that I think we need to get to, if as I kind of go out and sort of carry this value flag now, is using the term discipline. I think that's really, and I think that, Alistair, that's where you're at too, is what we're really talking about here is creating an organizational-wide, or at least commercial organization, if you want to limit it to that, an organizational-wide discipline around engaging your customers around dimensions of value that you collaboratively define as most important to that relationship. And then you can, of course, do that with software. You can do that other ways. But you can imagine now you do that through marketing and demand gen. You do that through digital engagement, which is also marketing. You do that through sales reps, virtually and in person, which would be sales. You do that at the renewal time, which is probably success. You do that at the expansion time, which is account management. And you may do that with experts, which is a center of excellence. But I think the thing that we have to solve for isn't like the roles or the people or the titles. The thing we have to solve for is how do I create almost like a DNA inside my company such that we think every engagement with our customers from way up funnel to way down funnel, implementation and beyond, is defined around or is organized around this definition of value. And this is Alistair, where it's like, academically, which I get accused of sometimes of talking that way, is like, it makes a lot of sense. It's logical. Practically, holy smokes, right? I mean, it's like, I put an article in HBR back in January, which I didn't title, by the way. This is our friends at HBR title, which is the sales and marketing are becoming obsolete, right? And that thing just exploded with a lot of attention. It's an amazing story of a company called Smart Technologies and how they've effectively dismantled their entire commercial organization and remantled it or reorganized it around customer buying jobs. And it's brilliant what they've done at Smart. And most organizations look at that story of what's going on at Smart and they say, hey, great for them. I can never do that. Right, and I think that's where we're going to wind up. If I'm a little concerned with this idea of value and value management, is like what we're talking about is all these things are easy to say and hard to do around cross-discipline, cross-silo collaboration, more effective organizations, breaking down silo barriers. I've yet to find a person who raises their hand and says we don't need to break down silo barriers, but I've yet to find a person who raises their hand and says that's super easy. I'll do it next week either. So we're in this interesting situation where the right answer, the best answer, is also, I don't know what the hardest, but one of the hardest. You know what that tells me is the first mover advantage here is massive. The company that's got either the creativity, the bravery, the skills to adopt this kind of posture and move there, and not all the way, at least quickly in that direction, is going to have a massive advantage over those who look at it and say, I could never do that.
I agree. So let me couple comments on
Yeah.
this. One, I agree academically it's a lot, but I always just challenge people to say you don't have to make it that hard. I always say
Totally fair. Yeah.
Start with two things, right? And let's use Smart Technologies as that example, right? Like if I'm going to really simplify down all of what they did.
Yeah.
In my mind, they took two things. Hey, I got a sales process. I have a way in which I create revenue. And I have these steps and I have these teams I engage, from marketing, my selling, my customer success side. There's all those things, right? And every company does. And I think every company would say, yes, I have that. I know what that is. You go, great. The part two I want you to do is now take that line and just tell me what's the buying process of a customer. Now that question always falls apart a little because people often don't know what the buying process is, but we can map a buying process. Brent, pre-Gartner, you did CEB. That was a big thing. Like buyer journey mapping is functionally done. You can go to your marketing team and have them map a buying process. So, okay, good. So you got the two. Now, they don't line up ever. And that's okay. I say, that's fine. Don't try to line them up because you're never going to get it to line up. It's going to be way too hard. Instead, ask yourself across those two lines, where do I have an intersection point that stalls or doesn't go as well as I want, that takes a little longer or has friction to the buyer? And once I know that, then I always say, okay, now we know that. Ask, can I automate that step? Can I improve upon that functional step? And if the answer is I can, but now there's a cost and impact of that, we got to rationalize that against adding a person. But you simply just start whack-a-moling down all these pieces. Because if you try to reinvent your entire go-to-market, you'll miss all of the upside in the market that you're talking about in first mover advantage.
I think
Brent.
that's
But
right.
if I take on pieces of that, I can suddenly drive real functional improvement, right? Like I can take my heads of sales and say, look, now I know those friction points across buy and sell process, and I'm defining where I can improve value. Maybe that is on the front end of a sales engagement. And you know what? That can give me faster continuous engagement, like we talked about last episode, continuous proof of value. Maybe I can ramp my reps, 3 times faster than my competitor. That's clearly going to be a big thing. And so forth. So I think breaking down across those two things is so critical and important, and then automated. And it's not like that's some pipe dream. That's what companies like us and others do now, right? Like you can literally ingest and find those friction points and automate it. And that now takes the behavior insight.
On that point, and Howard, I want to obviously get your thoughts on this too. So the when we lay it out like that, I find a lot of companies will, and particularly on the marketing side, or if you have one, a CX team, a customer experience team, will often do that exercise you just laid out. And when they hear friction points, they're looking for friction points between the customer company and our company. Where are we hard to interact with? Where are we hard to, where is our information overwhelming? Where are our sales reps not very responsive or whatever? Where's our website confusing? So they look for friction between in that boundary spanning world between the customer company and our company. Where I've landed so much in the work that I've done, I think is really equally interesting. If, in some ways, I think even more compelling is where are friction points not between you and the customer, but within the customer organization itself. So when you think of all those different stakeholders that are involved in in a purchase conversation, a purchase decision, which could go for months, right? And by the way, if you ask them, how do you feel about engaging in a purchase decision with your colleagues? They all say the same thing. I know because I've asked thousands of this. It's awful. I hate it. It's frustrating. It's all, it takes forever. I would never want to do that again. And so that's a really interesting thing to do is look for those moments of friction, not between them and us, but among them, right? So who should they have gotten involved and they didn't? Who raised questions they couldn't answer? And then I think it becomes a really interesting opportunity for us to proactively do what we can to make that process easier for them. So it's not just easier to deal with us, but easier to deal with each other. And this goes back, Howard, to your point about being a clinical psychologist, right? It's like it's a lot of, you weren't trying to make your patients easier to work with you. You're trying to help them make them easier to work with each other, right? And I think that's that same metaphor kind of that, and there's huge value in that because you made a career out of that, right? It's like there's value in the role that we play as a supplier, as a guide, as a coach, to helping customers be maybe just a little less dysfunctional, a little bit more confident in their ability just to decide and interact with each other.
Yeah, there's so much there to unpack. You started talking about discipline, and I think discipline is such a powerful word that encapsulates what's needed in every area of a business to deliver that value, right? You absolutely need discipline, and the question is, where can I apply that discipline that will yield the best possible result? So the first thing I need to do is I need to analyze what will move the needle the most, right? And I think with software, with studying, whatever it is, there's evidence that we have people who are high performers based on certain things or disciplines that they have, certain processes. Everybody has playbooks, right? The problem is with the playbook, just like anything, are you really multivariate testing your playbook to figure out in what context is it most effective? Because sales, relationships, life is dynamic and constantly changing with different variables. That's where the challenge becomes, right? So how do we identify where we apply that discipline? I tend to use sports analogies. I'll give you one. If you play golf and you decide that you want to go talk to the golf pro, and you have a new golf pro, and you start with him and he gives you the 14 things you need to change about your golf swing, you know what happens to your golf score?
It gets worse.
It goes through the roof.
Yeah.
We try and apply that same thing to, well, going back to our relationships. I have a conversation with my wife, and here's the 9 things that she needs to change to better deal with me.
I'm sure that goes over well.
How's that going to
Hey,
work?
honey,
for
here's
you,
9
right?
things you need to fix.
Right. Now, if I'm effective, I'm trying to sort through that list and say, wait a minute. Yes, let's look at that as our goal. We want to work on 9 things. And by the way, she's got 21 for me to work on, right? Not going to happen. So let's figure out what is the most important thing that we can work on. And we can do that through data. We can look at that by looking at your team, by looking at other teams. Like we don't have to run analytics. Just get started. Let's look at what are the 2, 3, 4 things that are small changes, whether it's, hey, your example, do we have the right internal processes? I have a sales leader that I've worked with that is brilliant, and he is 100% convinced with data that if his sales reps bring an opportunity to the table at over 50%, but there hasn't been a single meeting with a sales engineer involved, he immediately strikes that back down to 25%, right? Because his experience is, unless those internal processes are aligned, this deal is probably not over 50%. So it's not only internal processes, it's external. So what's beautiful about technology today is if you instrument across what you're doing and you're able to identify those areas where you need to apply the most discipline, that will create the greatest amount of change. These minor 2% changes across multiple processes has a synergistic effect and delivers exponential value. It's just we can't change everything at once. It's disruptive, it's change management, and it won't happen.
So I want to interject there again, in the spirit of not being too academia. Agreed. Now let's just role play out an average head of sales, a CRO out there, CSO, something like that. Again, I think they'll say, great, yes, fine. But that sounds like an ERP deployment to me, right? Now, we're both the SaaS companies. Brent, we're a SaaS company. This to me is why people need to leverage SaaS organizations, PLG-led organizations, right? It is now taking product that shifts that incremental value in with a speed coefficient with it. Because if you can't get this done, and I would say, back to customer value creation, if you can't prove that value in 90 days or under, why wouldn't I just add more headcount? Wouldn't I just throw more bodies at it, given the opportunity of it? And I think in this market, Brent, you and I bantered around this. I'm like, yeah, that's probably what they would have done 6 months ago. Now,
Can't do it.
I don't know that they had the choice. So now the choice is, well, either I cut or I need a way to apply what we're talking about in a fast, incremental lift way. So to you both, how are you seeing that addressed in terms of the speed piece of this? Howard, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I mean, I throw it back to you. Really, Alistair, you were Gartner, vice president, senior guy there. You saw all the technologies, talked to all the sales leaders. You joined revenue.io. How long does it take for us to give customers value and to get them up and implemented?
Sub 45 days. Yeah, less than 45 days. Most see it in proof of value within 30 days, which is going to exactly my point, Howard. If anybody is considering addressing this via technology these days, like if you can't rationalize it in that time period, and then Brent, to your point, and I think what happens really well in the customer value management space is the ongoing then continuous month to month proof of value and uplift of it. You're just not going to get there. I do not think we are in an economic climate where the heads of sales will tolerate, these longer duration, big ticket lifts that are there.
I'll just add, sorry, Brent, before you
jump in. No, go ahead, Howard. No, that's all right.
Super passionate, excited here. Look, I talk to sales leaders all the time, right? They're under immense pressure, right? Climate's changed, macroeconomics. They can't miss their quarter. They can't miss this quarter. They need to change the trajectory of this quarter. They need now. If they miss another quarter or 2 quarters, they could lose their job. Wall Street's not patient with people missing their earnings anymore. We're not at growth at any cost. So I need change now. And I need it to happen. I don't need months and months of data exercise. I don't need change management. I don't need tons of operations people. I need you to come in and help me with my situation, because if you don't, I don't have time to even talk to you. So we have to talk about delivering that value in the shortest period of time.
The decisions you need to make need to be faster cycle, implementable more quickly, but you need to make them with a view in the context of the fact that the world is changing. The commercial world is changing. Buyers are buying radically different. Alistair, you set it up. We still haven't knocked it down. The fact that, this crazy data that shows that customers don't want to talk to sales reps at all, right? I mean, it's like, what do you do in that world, right? And by the way, when they don't talk to your sales reps, they're actually worse off. So it's like this really bizarre world that's evolving in buying, if not selling right now. And we're going to have to change with it. We're going to have to think about things like org structure. We're going to have to think about things that are hard to do, that are going to take long-term investments. But to your point, Howard, it's always true in sales. Of course, we've got a quarterly number, and that the urgency around that quarterly number today is higher than ever before. So I think that's if for any head of sales listening right now, I think the mindset's got to be, how can I make short-term, very quick, precision bets that will simultaneously set me up, will future-proof me down the road. So so if you're just playing reactionary role, it's like just like throw more bodies at it, which no one can do right now with the climate, with the economy. But I'm going to put a specialist on this. So I'm going to do some sort of band-aid approach. You may have solved the short-term problem, but you're nowhere near to solving for the long-term change. And so I guess that'd be my last piece of advice. Like, what are the short-term, quick-hit things I can do now that also position me for success in a very different world a year from now? And that's where I land with you guys. That's whether it's SaaS. There's a lot of SaaS companies out there that can't help, but there's a lot that can. And I think, to your point, Alistair, the learning curve is quicker, right? So you can cycle your learning much faster in this world, and that's I think what everyone's going to have to do going forward, and just understand, what are we even trying to accomplish? That's where, again, I just keep gravitating back to this idea of value. It's like let's just sit down, brass tacks, and define the dimensions of value that we're trying to achieve, that we want to measure ourselves on. And so there you go.
Couldn't agree more, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to close on this final thought and comment for us, and that is, Salesforce recently came out. Funny enough, Brent, another former colleague of ours, Tiffany Bova, for those who remember her, had a great statement that the amount of money an average seller is prepared to pay for sales management advice. Did you hear what the number is, Brent, by chance?
I don't know it.
Well, I don't do too much on the spot, but do you want to take a guess at how much an average rep is prepared to pay for advice from their sales managers?
From their sales manager, or from a great sales manager?
From
their sales manager.
Their sales manager.
Well, that's got to be close to zero. It's either a small amount or a huge amount. I don't know which way the story goes. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go small amount.
That's a good guess. $1.
There you go.
$1 is what it comes back with. Okay.
Yeah.
The other interesting number is, Howard and I were interviewing somebody else recently, and we were looking in terms of value the buyers state they get from seller interactions.
Yeah.
Okay. And overall, 93% of executive buyers say their interaction with sellers are, quote, useless. So we got sellers that aren't prepared to pay for any help, and we got buyers that saying the interaction I have is useless. And we wonder why you see the rise of these self-service models. And so I know I'm setting up a provocative statement here for everybody here, but look, as we think about that, sales leaders today have to think about how they apply value back to their sellers that the seller wants to use and can use, right?
100%.
And that ultimately has to tie into customer value creation. Brent, exactly what you're working on, where that team is going, creation to the buy side that is relevant and timely on it. If we don't hit that, we're never going to get people off of spending $1, and we're going to have most people saying interactions are useless. Brent, love to have you back to lean in on that again. Future,
we will.
It'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
You're such a great thought leader in this.
Before we let Brent go, Brent.
Yes.
You joined Ecosystem Software. How do our listeners get in touch with you?
I have no idea. No, that would have been kind of funny. The marketer would have killed me. So we're at ecosystems.us is our website where you can find out more about this. We actually run a customer community called the Customer Value Community, is CVC, and you can find out more about that on our resources tab on our website and sign up. We run a Slack community. I'm in there every day asking really provocative questions, providing perspectives, and we run a webinar series. So there's a number of ways, and I'm of course on LinkedIn. That's the easiest thing, is find me on LinkedIn and I can guide you to all that. But super excited. For what it's worth, and I mean this quite sincerely, I legitimately am learning along with all of anyone else who's in this new value space. Again, I've been adjacent to it, and my eyes are kind of open. I knew it was important, but wow. And it's just nothing but upside for everyone involved here to get really smart on this idea. And I'll go on that journey with you, and we'll learn together. It'll be super fun.
Fantastic.
That's awesome. Brent, it was great having you. Huge fan of Challenger Sale. Huge fan of your research at Gartner.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you for joining Alistair and I. Really appreciate it.
100%. Thanks, guys.
See you all. Bye.